It's really good to talk to you in sort of in person because I actually work with you virtually every time I'm in the newsroom at WGN radio because you're usually the morning reporter.
Yeah, usually 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. on the weekends.
Gosh. I mean, how do you do those early morning hits or assignments? How do you stay awake or?
Lots of coffee. It's not easy. Actually, this is WGN is my sixth TV station, and at all six stations I work the morning show. So I probably can't remember the last time I got 8 hours of sleep. Probably college.
Wow. So before you coming to Chicago, where did you work?
Let's see. I worked in Columbia, Missouri for an NBC affiliate there. CBS station in Meridian, Mississippi. Then I moved to the opposite climate up in Wausau, Wisconsin for an ABC affiliate there. Then I moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And then I came home I was at CLTV for 25 years, and then CLTV merged with WGN. So that made it a couple of, so far, 28 years with the company.
Yeah, I remember you on CLTV. I used to work with Bill Mahler on the radio side.
Yeah.
He's like the best guy in TV. And I actually went to CL2. Yeah, it's really great. Well, I mean, when you were working in those smaller markets, was your goal to get to a big market like Chicago?
Yes. Yeah. I think, you kind of have to, what do they call it? Paying your dues.
Yeah.
In this business. In the first couple of markets, you're what you call in this business a one-man band. You got to lug around the equipment yourself. You got to shoot the stories yourself. You do the interviews yourself. You don't have the luxury of a cameraman. And so, but that was the case probably in the first two stations I worked at. And my first job, I was only making $12,000 a year. And I look back and I think, how in the world did I make it on that? And I remember calling my dad after graduating from journalism school. Said, Dad, I got a job. He's like, oh, honey, that's great. Congratulations. How much? And I said, 12 grand. And I think he thought I meant 12 grand a month. Mm-hmm. And it was actually 12 grand a year. And all of a sudden he starts screaming in the phone, what? I paid out of state tuition to send you to college and you could make that flipping burgers at McDonald's. But, I don't think my mom and dad ever actually got what I did, but I'd like to think that maybe deep down inside they were proud.
Well, see, what happens is, especially nowadays, it seems like people go to these smaller markets and then they don't get paid much and they have to do all this stuff themselves, MMJ, and then they get out pretty quickly. Do you think that people,
I think with MMJ, because you're doing everything yourself, the burnout rate is very high. I mean, it's even with help. This business, it's very stressful. It's not for the faint of heart. But I think I always tell journalism students, make sure you really, really want to do this for a living. To make sure that your heart truly is in this. Because if you are the kind of person who likes a 9-to-5 gig, you want a life, you want your weekends off, you want your holidays off, you don't want the phone to ring at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, then don't do this for a living. And but I think that drive, that fire in the belly has to be there, because I think when you're those early days when you're one-man banding, you've got to think down the road, this is going to pay off for me later on.
Well, yeah. Do you think it can pay off for people? I mean, because a lot of people in the INBA, for instance, where I'm going to post this, they feel like it's harder. There are more barriers, but is it different than it used to be, or what are the chances?
I think it's much harder now than it used to be. I started in this business in the 1980s, and I think there's a lot more stress now. I think social media has added an extra element, because now we're all required to file stories for the web, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I think there's a lot more to juggle now. And I think it's, TV, it's not the same exactly as when I started in the business. We didn't have that whole digital side. So, I would say it's much more difficult, I think. And, the competition in front of the camera has always been extremely fierce.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a critical shortage in our business of producers right now. So I think if you're a good producer, you can move your way up very quickly. But I think, for example, if we have an opening for reporter anchor, easily the news director might get 5,000 resumes a week.
Yeah.
So it's very competitive. I'm not going to say it's easy and it won't pay off ever, but it is hard. It is very hard.
Well, yeah, but also back in the 80s, wasn't the tech different? So it wasn't as quick, right? Just to edit video.
It wasn't. We were on, we had made the transition from film to something called 3/4 inch. It was this big bulky deck. It looked like a brick. And when you would put the tape in the machine, it would go clunk, clunk. It would make this funny noise. And yeah, the editing was not as easy and seamless. In fact, there were times where you would be editing your story and you would accidentally wipe out part of a soundbite. Where now with this whole digital thing, everything's on the laptop. It's so much faster. It's easier to clean up mistakes. It's easier to change sound bites. It's much easier if you wipe out your track, it's so you could fix it within 30 seconds. So it's completely different game. Technology has made it so much faster.
Well, when you went into journalism, did you only want to be on the camera or did you want to work behind the scenes?
I wanted to be on camera. I started out in radio. I worked at a campus radio station at the University of Missouri, and the Mizzou J School also runs a KBIA, which is an NPR affiliate. So everyone in the journalism school is required to do radio first if you're in the broadcasting section. So you spend maybe a year at the radio station and then transition over to TV. And I think that's good because with radio, I think because you don't have the visuals, but I think it really makes you hone in on the writing, net sound, right. That kind of thing. And, radio, you could roll out of bed and put a baseball hat on. You don't have to worry about the whole makeup and the TV hair thing.
Right. Although now with social media, you sort of have to look sort of decent because you never know. Yeah. Because otherwise they live stream it or something. But okay, so what do you like about being in front of the camera?
The adrenaline rush. It's never the same thing. Some people have a job where they go in, they sit in a cubicle, they basically essentially do the same thing every day. That is not the case in TV news. Every day, I walk in at 2 or 3 a.m. I don't know most of the time, I don't know what I'm going to end up doing for the morning show until I'm there. Maybe if the president's coming to town, you have a heads up on that because you have to go through the White House credential process. But mostly, our first staff meeting is at 2 a.m. So you don't know. But I think it's the adrenaline rush. It's, when you really, you have a live shot and you really nail it. And those days where everything goes really well, it's a rush. It's great. And those are the days you think, gosh, this is the greatest job in the world. But, the not so good days, I think it's people not in the business, they think it's so glamorous. It's really not all the time. I think they don't see the days where you're standing outside, it's wind chill 10 below zero, and you're trying to speak on camera and the live truck has gotten stuck in the snow, or or it's 100 degrees. And you're sweating and you're trying the makeup's trying not to run, or you're running around and you're trying to get interviews for a story and you're knocking on doors and it's 100 degrees. So in those days, it's not so glamorous and not so fun.
Yeah. How do you get those interviews? Especially after a tragic incident or something.
Yeah, that's probably, I think, the hardest part of this job, because on the shift I work, you do a lot of crime. It's the murder mayhem, unfortunately. And it's very hard knocking on doors. And, people don't like it when you try to call them at 5 o'clock in the morning. They might be a little more receptive. But I think when I have to knock on the door of a murder victim's family, especially a child, and you have to at least give them the opportunity to see if they want to talk, you have to try to see if the family's willing to share a photo of their slain child. I always brace myself and I fully expect that to get the door slammed in my face. But I think most people I have to make the attempt. And, sometimes I get the door slammed in my face and sometimes they welcome me in. And I'm always shocked when that happens. Come on in. Or I am always amazed when after such tragedy and in one of the worst moments of somebody's life, when they're willing to give me the time of day. I am amazed by that. I am in awe of that. And, you know, when they're willing to share and talk about their lost loved one, sometimes for people, I think it helps them. Some people don't want to have anything to do with it, but other people want the world to know about their loved one. They want to know that their child was somebody and was somebody special and is not a statistic. And so I think in those instances where they are willing to share pictures with you and they sit down and they talk and do an interview, that is a privilege. It really is.
Yeah, because some people criticize local media or even national media, and they'll say, why are they in these people's faces after a tragedy? You know, it could be like a flood or anything.
I totally get it.
But why do you think news covers that, likes to cover that?
I think that for television, in order to tell the story, you have to tell the story with a real person. A real person. Because I think it hits home more if you have somebody, a victim or a carjacking victim who, you know, this is what happened to me and shares their story. I think it drives home the point. It tells the story visually. And, you know, I think that maybe it helps the viewers relate. You know, that person could be my neighbor. That person could be my mom. But I understand why people might see us as vultures. And I totally get that. And I think all of my colleagues totally get that. And like I said, it's the unfortunate part of the job where you make the attempt, but you have to do it. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, the most recent story, well, not most recent, one of the recent stories you covered, which really did hit home, was when that guy's white Kia, you were really good at that.
Yeah.
Okay, can you just say what happened? Because I saw it again and again. But
we were outside the 19th District Police Station, which
part of the city?
And that's right by Wrigley Field. And there had been a string of armed robberies, and I think there were 5 in a row within a 20-minute period, and they were all in the Lakeview area. And so police put out this alert. So we're going around and we're shooting video of all these locations, and we're setting up for the 4 a.m. show outside the police station down the street from Wrigley Field. And in all of these armed robberies, the weapon was similar, a rifle. 2 people get out and they hold up senior citizens or somebody who's walking down a sidewalk in a residential area. 2 of them happened outside Northside bars. And so the rifle was a description and a white car. So we're setting up for the morning show outside the police station at 4 a.m. We see one squad car after another fly by us. And we're like, oh, wonder where they're going. Turns out they were just going down the street to the corner at a Shell station. And so one of my cameramen is nosy, and we're getting ready, and I'm finishing up what I'm talking to the writer, the producers, and the cameraman walks over to one of the officers and says, hey, what's going on? What you guys doing? And he said, he didn't say it was off the record. He said, see that white car there, abandoned? Yeah. Well, that fits the description of the car in the armed robberies. And so my camera goes running back, Judy, Judy, Judy. And we said, what? Oh, let's go. So they tear down the truck, they tear down the gear. 10 minutes later, we moved and we're in front of the gas station. Then throughout the morning, during the morning show, we see this guy, and he shows up and he's talking to the cops, and it looks like he's filling out paperwork. And he's there for, I would say, at least an hour. So finally, we see him get into the car. So we're assuming the police have dusted it for prints, they process it for evidence, and they're releasing the car back to him. So the police crime tape was down, he's in his car, and I think he's calling either his wife or his insurance company. And so I looked at my camera and said, let's go. What's the worst that could happen? And at first he didn't want to talk. And then he said, okay, I'll talk to you for a little bit. And then proceeds, and I asked, what's your first name? He goes, ironically, my name is Rob.
Wow.
Robberies. And he drove a white Kia, and, you know, maybe a lot of viewers or listeners may know that white Kias and Hyundais have been, you know, or not white, but Kias and Hyundais, apparently those cars, for whatever design, they make it easy to steal. And Rob proceeds to tell us that he and his wife were just discussing they were waiting to hear from Kia on a fix. And his ignition was all destroyed. His car was drivable, but he was afraid to turn the ignition off. So he had to drive straight to wherever he was driving. And it turns out the thieves had stolen his car from his apartment building parking garage the night before. And he did not know it was stolen until 4:30 in the morning when the cops knocked on his door. And they said, Mr. So-and-so, do you know where your car is? He said, no, I parked it in the parking garage last night. And they were like, no, it's not there anymore. So that's how that interview came to be.
That was incredible, because also what was good about it. Now, this is good journalism. This is why I always say to people, if there's any national story, such as the president getting booked somewhere, go to the local media, because the local media does a very good job of being careful. So one thing you were careful on that story about is you said the police are looking at a vehicle that matches the description of those using the robberies. You didn't make the connection.
No,
You know,
I'm just saying police aren't confirming that this may indeed be the
Right.
vehicle involved, but it was left here at
right.
this gas station. They're looking at the surveillance video and it kind of matches description.
Right. And that's very responsible. See, I think a lot of people don't understand that you have to have a lot of self-control to not go that extra step, because
Right.
some people will say it's believed that and some people won't include that. But the language has to be very careful, or else you're doing a disservice to the whole process.
Right. I had to say the police aren't confirming this is the car involved, but it fits the description and that's why they're here processing it.
Right.
So it was just, I mean, all of these, the witnesses all gave the same story. So, I think, as a viewer or listener, you kind of think, okay, same MO.
Right.
So very possible the same two thieves.
And it's good that you did talk to the owner, because then it puts a face on it, like you said, because
Yeah.
it's been these robberies and people just think, oh, these cars are getting stolen and they're
Right.
crimes committed. But now we see somebody who's a victim of it.
Right. He wasn't, first we asked, were you carjacked? And he said no. And then he proceeded to tell us the part of the story about how he didn't even know his car was missing from the garage. And so
No, okay, so since you anchored basically at CLTV, right? Or what
I
did you?
did weekend mornings for 25 years.
So some people who I've worked with and I've met, they like anchoring, they don't like reporting, because it's just easy to go in, read the cue cards and call it a day. So what's it like to go from anchoring into reporting?
Well, in a way, it's two different sets of skills. Anchors, it's a little more theater. They're good journalists, but the way I see it is sometimes they just have that it factor that the camera loves their face.
Yeah.
They're oozing camera presence. They're great on their feet. They're great live. Sometimes when craziness is happening behind the scenes and things aren't working right, videos not rolling, sound bites aren't rolling, they are able to keep it together. And anchors are also what we call the final gatekeepers, because sometimes if there are mistakes in a script or a fact doesn't sound right, the anchor is the last gatekeeper. You're the last person, those words come out of your mouth. So it's a little bit of a different skill. Reporting, these are people who are really good on the streets. An anchor may be great in front of the camera in the studio and has that special something and that kind of skill. But if you put them in a bad neighborhood and they're trying to get information from a prostitute on the corner, do you understand what I'm saying? It's a little different skill.
Yeah.
It's a different skill to knock on doors. It's a different skill when you're trying to speak with the families of murder victims to try to get across what you're trying to do, or at least to get some information about this child. This child was going to 5th grade. This child loved basketball, was a huge, Kobe Bryant fan. It tells you this was somebody. And so I think, and the people in the field, it takes a lot of endurance. I mean, you're running around in all kinds of crazy weather, knocking on doors, sometimes in not so great neighborhoods. Sometimes, you're dealing with people who, aren't so nice and want to mess with the live truck or, try to mess with you. And so I'm climbing in and out of the truck all day constantly. So it's two different skills. But I think when I went into the business, I had kind of experience in both. But I think
no, but the impression I get with some anchors, okay, I've never worked in TV, maybe I will in the future, but is that I know that some of them, I have found out that some of them actually get involved with the writing so that by the time
yes.
they're on the air, they know what we're reading, but some people don't. So is that true? I mean, I don't know.
You mean they read their copy cold?
Yeah, or they're not
Yes.
involved in the writing process. They just
Yes.
show up and they're like, okay, and then they read the teleprompter. But what if the teleprompters? I've seen a major anchor mess up because they're like do, and I thought, did somebody try to make them look bad or something?
A good anchor has at least gone through their scripts ahead of time once.
Yeah.
Because that helps with pacing. It helps with flow and rhythm and transitioning. There are times when a breaking news story or a story has to get changed at the last minute, and the producer will warn you. Sometimes it will warn you in your earpiece, there's a change to page A15, or I had to make an adjustment. There's a funny name coming up that may be hard to pronounce. So sometimes if there's a breaking news story, you do end up having to read it cold. But I would say 90% of the time it doesn't have to be a cold read.
Okay.
So, but the good anchors will go through their copy ahead of time. They will make adjustments. They will edit the script, perhaps not only to their liking or maybe how it makes sense to them, but how the script, the way the words come out, we feel comfortable the way it comes out of their mouth. Every anchor has a different reading style. Some anchors need shorter sentences. Some can handle a longer sentence before having to take a breath. So it's just, it's kind of like, how each president has a speechwriter, and that speechwriter learns that president's rhythms and his pacing and how he speaks and how to get the best out of that. That's what it's kind of the same thing. Like ideally in a perfect world, you would have the same writers running for the same anchors because their style, what words they tend to stumble on. Yeah. That kind of thing. But I would say most anchors I know are pretty involved in the writing and the copy and the story content.
Yeah, because actually it was Bill Mahler. I'm going to mention him. He's now on the East Coast, but that's what first of all, he was excellent on TV. And plus he gave me really good advice for writing because he actually sent me scripts that he got that he rewrote, and he always customized. I have so much respect for that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Bill is a master, one of the best.
Yeah, he's so good.
Yeah. And great ad libber. Spot news, breaking news, no script in front of him, nothing in the prompter whatsoever, and he could go.
Yeah.
He could do it. And that's a gift. That really is a gift. And
he also gave me advice about writing itself because I wasn't used to the news writing. So he told me how to think differently, and it made a huge difference. So I'm just gonna give him a shout out. But also another thing is how did you learn how to be on camera? Like how to look good or how to have that presence?
Let's see. When I was in journalism school, I had a professor say, Judy, you've got to get TV hair. I was like, TV hair?
What does that mean?
TV hair is, do you remember in the 80s where it's the stereotypical anchor bob? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And I don't know if the younger listeners would know what that is, but all of the, it was hair that was polished, professional looking, didn't move, hair shellacked with hairspray. And basically TV hair is photogenic hair. Yeah. And so I think sometimes it's like the people who work in frame, sometimes it's just camera presence a lot of times is something you're either born with or you're not. And I think a lot of times we all start out and we're rough on the edges. And I think the first couple of stations I worked at, the news director sent me to consultants, and I worked for many years with appearance coaches and talent coaches and voice coaches. So I think, when you're just starting your career and you're talking on camera and you're voicing a story, we tend to have that sing-song delivery. And then, it's that sing-song thing, and you got to learn to get rid of that. So, but that kind of polish, it comes with time.
Yeah, because you're saying, the reason why I'm asking is because there are a lot of, you said they get thousands of applications so I'm just wondering for people who are in smaller markets, I've seen some smaller market people who are better than Chicago people. Like I was in the Cleveland area. My gosh, this is some years ago, but they were so good. Mm-hmm. And then I see some people in smaller markets and they don't really have it as much. They're not as comfortable. But
maybe they look like they're just out of college or something like
yeah, or
that.
they're man, or they're not owning it. I think it's because people are not comfortable in their own skin. I don't know what the issue is, but
Yeah. Well, and I think with time and experience comes that confidence, but you have to exude authoritativeness.
yeah.
And that comes with time. And I think it's, how do you explain that to a 22, 23-year-old just out of J school? It comes with time. And I think that's why a lot of us started out in smaller markets where people aren't expected to be as polished, but that's kind of where you make your mistakes,
Mhm.
right? Because by the time you get to somewhere like Chicago or New York or LA, that's not the place. It's, you don't learn on the job there. So, but yeah, I think, it's just, I would have to say, yeah, a lot of coaching.
Well, I have heard about those consultants and so forth, but one thing is the people work in smaller markets. I meet these people in the INBA and they want to get to Chicago, but I say to them, are you ready to cover crime, murder, carjackings, death? Because that's what you're not going to be covering lifestyle stuff. And some people, like some person I just interviewed last month from the Quad Cities, he said that people want to do lifestyle. It's like, well, yeah, but you got to go through other stuff. Is that true?
I have heard that they want to be features reporters.
Features, right. Okay.
Yeah. And unfortunately, newsrooms nowadays, there are a lot more general assignment reporters than features. I think we have 4 or 5 reporters that do nothing but features, and I think that's rare.
Yeah.
Usually most stations, if they can afford it, they might have 1 or 2 features reporters. But I think actually we might have 5 or 6 who do nothing but features. And those jobs are very hard to come by. It's kind of like a sports reporter or sports anchor will get even more resumes because you might have 25 general assignment reporters, but you might only need 4 reporters in a sports department.
Right. Everybody wants to do sports, at least on the radio side. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I would say for those features positions, sports, if you think it's competitive for general assignment news, it's even more competitive for those positions. And most of our feature reporters, they did regular general assignment news before. So they didn't come out of college or or go right into a small market doing features. It doesn't, Now, I'm not saying some people get lucky.
Yeah.
And they're in the right place at the right time, but I don't know many people. Most of the features reporters I know started out doing general assignment news.
Well, what I tell people is what I tell people is start a YouTube channel, start a Vimeo, start a TikTok, and do your features. Get it, go with your passion. And then maybe down the line, it might become part of your repertoire professionally, but if you want to do it, do it.
Yeah. And actually, I think doing a good feature is harder than doing a straight hard news story. I think it takes a lot more skill, a lot more creativity, a way with words, knowing how to, write to video and bring in the nat sound perfectly where it is, where, in the story. A straight hard crime story basically writes itself. It's who, what, where, how, when, why. This is what happened. This is what this person said. This is what this person said. It's very straightforward. But I think being able to write a great feature piece, that's a gift.
Yeah. Well, have you ever wanted to do features or have you ever done them?
Once in a while. Yeah. Like today I covered the triathlon.
Right.
So, once in a while you get to do something fun. But I would say, yeah, unfortunately, 90% of what I do is crime or straight hard news, politics. But especially on Saturday and Sunday, sometimes, those, if I'm going to do something light, actually yesterday I went to the Great American Dog Show of all places. So, but that's just my opinion. I think a hard news story is actually easier to write than a feature. I think feature reporters have extra talent.
Well, it's true because you have to really tell a creative story and make it compelling. And
whereas a hard news story is straightforward. Here are the facts.
Yeah, that's true. But, I guess the challenging thing on doing a straight news story, this is what's hard about the writing that I've perceived about TV writing is sometimes nothing's happening. Okay, the police have not talked to you yet. There's nobody out yet because it's 4 a.m. So how do you write differently for each live hit or each recorded hit or whatever?
Wow.
You're good with that though. See, people respect you where I am.
As a producer, the producer, even if you've got 30, sometimes I will only have 3 sentences of information on a story or a particular crime or fire that happened. And that is where your ad lib skills come. I don't want to say embellishing because that's not a good word. And how there's some people that are just good talkers.
Yeah.
They could talk for 4 minutes about nothing and all that. And it's a skill. But regardless, when my producer tells me I've got a 2.5-minute black hole in my show, and I know you only have 3 sentences of information, but you got to fill my 2.5 minutes. Yeah. And you find a way to do it. You start describing the atmosphere, the scenery. What did I see on my way here? What am I witnessing right now? What streets do the police have blocked off? It's kind of like you just have to learn to kind of what we call flush it out. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there are lots of times when I only have 30 seconds of information, and it's something that an anchor can read in a script in 30 seconds. But for sometimes in television, to make a TV magic to look good, it looks better to toss to a reporter who talks for 30 seconds. Right. And sometimes, in the old days, you didn't go to a reporter live unless there was a reason for the live shot. You don't do live for the sake of being live. But I think with technology, that's changed. Sometimes there's no reason for us to be live somewhere. Or like when you're at City Hall and I'm previewing a city council meeting, doesn't happen for 6 hours. But I'm live. Right. And I'm filling the show. And so I'm telling people what's to come. But yeah, now it's just, unfortunately, I think we go live for the sake of being live, when sometimes just an anchor read or a straight package without, the reporter live wrapping around the package will suffice and tell the story.
I know, but as a viewer though, I mean, live is what makes broadcast media different. Okay. Because there's so much recorded stuff out there. Yeah. So I think it's great to go live, even for radio. It's very, like, nowadays there's so much stuff that's pre-recorded and people have so much control over it. And live means you're actually there witnessing it. That somebody's not getting it distilled in a newsroom.
Right. So. And I think, the downside of that is sometimes, especially the hours I work, you have to be careful in some of these neighborhoods. Yeah. And so sometimes it's not safe to be live. And then we got to make a judgment call. And there are times where we've had to call the assignment desk of the producer and say, listen, it's like, this is shady here. And this is not a good, safe place for us to be with a $75,000 camera and, a live truck. And, we're in a walking billboard, basically. Right. So, and that aspect, yeah, you have to make a judgment call. And, and the news director basically has, told the entire staff, if the reporter and the photographers out in the field say it's not safe, believe them. Don't question them and tell them to get out of there. Because there are mornings where you're in a dicey situation. And, the people work in the newsroom at the station. They're in the heat, in the air conditioning. They got a bathroom, they got a coffee machine, they have a microwave. And sometimes I think they lose, they don't realize, and some of them may have never been out in the field before. So they don't know what it's like to have to be out there.
Right. Well, that's why I think it's important when people are working in a newsroom that they know the place where they're working, like they know the town or the jobs, or they have, they understand the areas of in our case, the areas of the city and the time. That
does help. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, there are times where, I think I once, had a producer who, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but didn't know that City Hall and the Thompson Center were right across the street from each other. Yeah. And so, but that's when the assignment editors usually are people who know the city and know how far things are, what's realistic, traffic, can we, it may look this big on the map, but realistically with traffic, with the construction going on, can the crew get from point A to B realistically on time and make it? So that's, but that's the assignment editor's job, to play traffic cop.
Yeah. But when you were in the business many years ago, was it similar that it was sometimes dangerous? And would they also have that warning to not be out there?
I would say that that was never an issue until Chicago. Because the smaller markets, smaller towns, the crime issue was not as big of a deal. I think I never had that issue in Mississippi, Missouri, Wisconsin, Iowa. It was never an issue for me personally until Chicago. I think probably because big city.
Now, what are those other places like Mississippi? Well, Wisconsin, we sort of know, but what are those other places like?
Well, Mississippi, Meridian, Mississippi, was a CBS affiliate. They actually had 3 TV stations in that city. It was a little bit of a culture shock for me growing up. I was born in San Francisco, but I grew up in Chicago in Rogers Park at the corner of Toohey and Ridge. And it was a bit of a culture shock. The heat, the humidity, the bugs I didn't even know existed down there. But I think Southerners, it is true what they say about Southern hospitality. You know, how are you? They always want to feed you. Did you eat yet? Did you eat yet? And Southern cooking, you talk about comfort food, it is so good, but you can't eat like that every day. So it was definitely a different culture. What amazed me about Mississippi is, you know, in this business, if you're going to work in broadcasting, you want the Midwestern accent. And the reporters who were from the South that I worked with, when we would speak, not on camera, very thick Southern drawl. But as soon as that camera came on, it was the Midwest accent. They had learned to lose it. And so Mississippi was a bit of a culture shock. And Missouri, you know, Midwestern, maybe a little more, Mississippi, Missouri, much more conservative than Chicago. Wisconsin, coldest place I've ever worked and lived.
Okay.
And but just in the summertime, beautiful. I learned about spear fishing. I kind of, you know, when it's that cold all the time, you know, I kind of, I got ice fishing. I got the appeal of snowmobiling. I got the appeal of, you know, cross-country skiing. I never understood ice fishing. Just standing there, 10 degrees on the ice, looking at a hole fishing. I just never got that. But Wisconsin, you know, there's a mom and pop bar in every corner, snowmobiling from one bar to the other. I never learned to like cheese curds. Huge in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But, and then Iowa was what you would expect. You know.
So how did you get to the bigger market, to the number 3 market, which is probably number 2 back then, right? Resume. I mean, there were times that I sent out maybe like 10 resumes a week, but I had an agent at that point in my career, and that agent got me into Chicago. Okay. Yeah, I met other people who also have agents. I think
Yeah.
it seems to be a common thing.
Yeah. Usually in the bigger markets, it helps to have an agent to get your foot in the door. Not always, you know. But yeah, that's what helped me. And the agent, I think, had an inside track that at CLTV, they're looking for 2 reporters, and they would like these 2 reporters to be minorities. So I think that inside track helped.
And can I ask you, I mean, I read some about you, but you did study in Taiwan at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you speak Hokkien or Mandarin?
Well, I'm ashamed to admit my Mandarin is terrible now. There was a time where I was pretty fluent and I could take my college lecture notes in Chinese. Wow. Now I probably couldn't. I think because I don't use it every day. My mom and dad are gone now, so I don't, and my brother and sister and I speak English.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that was one semester at Tam Kung University, which in Chinese would be pronounced Danshui Daxue.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that was I think that was, you know, my mom and dad's kind of way of trying to make sure I don't lose touch with my heritage and my roots.
Did they come from Taiwan?
Well, my dad grew up in Shanghai, and my mom was from near Wuhan, okay, of all places. And they met in Taiwan. My mother was an escapee from the communist regime. And her father was a supporter of Chiang Kai-shek, did not want to be part of the communist regime. So my mother's mother was the architect of their escape. And she came up with an escape plan. And in the middle of the night, they snuck out, hiding in rice fields in the middle of the night, hiding from the communist soldiers, bribing one soldier after another. And they decided where the family would eventually meet up. Some went to Hong Kong, some went to Taiwan, but they ended up mostly, I would say both of them, they wanted to escape from communism. So
yeah, I mean, I lived in Asia for 4 years. It changed my life. And I did meet people who had those stories. Some people, I met this one guy here in Chicago, but his dad left as a child and he went to Taiwan. And yeah, there's so many stories like that. But yeah, everybody should read up on that because it's changed so much over there since I've been there. I didn't go to Taiwan, but I went to mainland China a couple times. But yeah, it's huge. Like people, I don't think, especially here because we're not on the Pacific, so people don't really know these stories in the Midwest as much.
Yeah, and it's just, and most of the Asian immigrants came through Angel Island, not through, the East Coast. Right. And so, it's just, my mom and dad, it was the classic immigrant American dream story. My dad used to be a homeless man, and he and my mother came to this country in the 60s. They didn't speak a word of English, and my dad had $20 in his pocket. But they made it. People talk about these migrants and how, maybe have questions about, the immigration process, but it's your classic American dream story. And I can't help but sympathize because my parents were migrants in a way. They came here on a boat, and they made it. They put 3 kids through college. My dad managed to get himself through grad school and learn the language here. So, and I would think, those are the kind of people you want in this country.
Yeah, I was gonna say, since you're, because you said that when you were hired at CLTV, they wanted minorities. Did they see that how did they see that was important?
A TV newsroom, especially its on-air, but not just the on-air staff, behind the scenes also. Diversity is important because you need different points of view in a newsroom. And I think viewers need to see people who look like them on camera. I think, it's important. A lot of times it helps if you have to go into a Latino neighborhood that you have someone who understands the culture, understands the thinking, can speak, the language if there's a language barrier. That's very important. Same thing with the Black community. You need to have that kind of representation. And a TV newsroom should be reflective of the population of its viewers. And I think in Chicago, Blacks make up about 33% of the viewing audience. Latinos are about 30%. And I think a lot of times newsrooms need to reflect that, but unfortunately, it's not always the case. And I think a lot of times if you look at newsrooms, even behind the scenes, not just on camera, you might, there may be an issue where every supervisor, manager, anybody who makes decisions is white. And I think that's not such a good thing either, because that may taint what stories you may decide to cover. Like, they may not understand, why this is important to that community, why this is an important issue to people of this heritage, that kind of thing. And I think you need more of that discussion, that conversation behind the scenes, because that dictates how you cover stories.
Yeah, I interviewed Ravi Bajwal for INBA and for my own podcast, and he's at ABC 7. He's in, you know who he is.
Yeah, I know Ravi, yeah.
And yeah, he said the same thing. And well, he's A-list now on air, but he was saying the same thing. You need more diversity to reflect the viewers and so forth.
And a good example of that, I don't know if you remember, I think this was in the 90s, maybe. Do you remember the singer Selena?
Yes.
Okay. Carol Simpson used to be the weekend anchor at ABC World News. And news trickled in that Selena had been murdered. It was a predominantly white newsroom. And Carol, who is African-American, who is the Selena woman? And nobody in this newsroom had any idea what a big deal she was to the Latin community. I mean, this would have been like Madonna being murdered. And so had there been more diversity, maybe more Latinos working behind the scenes as editors, producers, assignment editors, somebody would have spoken up. This is a big deal. This is a big story. And that night it was the lead story on the nightly news.
Okay.
So that's, an example of why you need diversity in the decision-making process as well.
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen local Miami TV, but I did it when the president had to show up for, I forgot what it was, something, and I noticed that it was extremely diverse. I mean, every kind of person was out on the field.
Miami is diverse.
Yeah, but it seems like they have it because every reporter, every anchor, nobody was the same. It was really cool. But
yeah.
So do you think it has gotten better over the years?
Yes, but I think it probably, I think, I still believe that, yes, we have improved, especially in front of the camera, we've improved the diversity and there's been a conscious effort. In fact, I just a few weeks ago in July, I was at the Asian American Journalists Convention in Washington, D.C., and all the major stations and TV companies set up there and they recruit. They go to the Black Journalists Convention. They go to the Hispanic Journalists Convention. They recruit, and they try to grow. But I think where we need to do better is I think that we need to improve the diversity behind the scenes of the writers, the producers, the people you don't see on camera, because they too are part of the decision-making process.
Yeah. I was just asking about writing before I forget. Do you write to the video or how do you write TV news?
We write to video. It's kind of, broadcast writing is different from newspaper writing. You're writing for the human ear. You're writing for what sounds good. I always use the example, for example, Dr. Seuss, The Cat in the Hat, Green Eggs and Ham. Those stories, those books were meant to be read out loud. And that's what broadcasting writing is. It's meant to be read out loud. And so you have to be a little more conversational. Whereas a newspaper, for example, you have to write in complete sentences. I don't write my scripts in complete sentences because people date one-on-one. We don't speak in complete sentences all the time. So it's different. But if I'm writing a story, let's say the first thing I think of, what is my best piece of video? We call it the money shot. What is the best shot? What is the best net sound pop I've got? And I try to start with that because that's what helps draw the viewer in. So yeah, we write to video, and sometimes you don't have the video and I have to figure out a different way. But sometimes if you have a really, really good soundbite and it's just so good and someone's telling the story, or it's, very rarely in TV do we like to start a story with a soundbite, but sometimes there just really is a compelling soundbite where people just say it like it is, and then you could start off that way. But yeah, write to your best video, write to your best sound.
Well, also I noticed in TV, and I may even make the suggestion to WGN, but it just seems like they don't use just regular nat sound, like regular ambient sound. And I keep thinking if they did that, because people are not always looking at the TV, they're listening to TV.
Yes, they got the TV on, they're doing dishes in the kitchen, they're half listening.
But sometimes I think that they should be using, because one time I asked this guy on the TV side, I said, do you guys have nat sound that I can use for radio? It's like, yeah, it's this crowd noise. I'm like, no, that's what's good. Okay, we want that. Yeah. And I thought they should put that on the TV instead of this quiet video.
We should do it more often.
Yeah, I might pitch that idea, even though I don't work on the TV.
Yeah, stuff. We should do it more often
because there's a lot of great nat sound.
Yeah, it gives you the atmosphere,
right?
And like today at the triathlon, people cheering, yes, go, Dad, go, that kind of thing. That brings the viewer there.
But what I'm saying is that, see, what they'll do on the TV side is they'll say, they'll have like 2 seconds of cheering, then die down, then have reading or something, and then have silent video. And what I'm thinking is they do have tons of gnats on. They should just
Yes.
roll it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
String
think
it
sometimes
together.
people think that the gnats may be distracting and competing with the anchor's voice. You know, you never know what's going on. Sometimes, like, I get very frustrated if a piece of video is saved without gnats. Like, what really drives me crazy is, like, we'll have a parade and it'll be silence. Like, somebody didn't bother to bring up the gnats. I'll be like, where's the gnat sound on this thing?
Right.
You can't have a parade without gnats.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. They'll have,
Yeah.
yeah. Then when I want to go into the video raw, I'm like, oh, here's the gnat, or yeah, it won't be there. But yeah, I think that maybe you can tell that to your bosses. But
Yeah.
I'm just working behind the scenes usually.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but radio, you don't have the visuals. So
Right.
you have to have great writing and you know, and that great gnats, you know.
Okay, so what kind of advice do you have? Okay, sorry, back to the thing when you said different groups are recruiting. You said about getting behind the scenes. Now, one thing we discussed at INBA when we were talking about diversity at the last convention is that it doesn't pay well, so people are not going to be attracted to the business. So what about that issue?
Oh, yeah, that's tough. Yeah.
What should people do if they know, if they're from a group that has been underrepresented in media? What can they do?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer that, because I think, unfortunately, yeah, those of us who work in front of the camera get the higher salaries.
Although in the smaller markets, I don't think they get such high salaries, even if they're on camera.
Like I said, I made $12,000 a year my first job. And so, oh boy, that's tough. But, traditionally for a long time, stations and news directors perhaps may have been able to keep salaries low because everyone wants to be on TV. They have 5,000 resumes to choose from. I could find somebody who wants to be on TV and will do it for this salary, but there is a critical producer shortage in our business. In fact, CBS Network just hired a person, created a position where this person's job is to do nothing but recruit producers for CBS stations. It is, I've heard my bosses talk about it. I heard, people talking about it at the AHA convention. I think with that shortage, I think that there maybe, if you're a good producer and you can, you're going to move up faster and hopefully that will drive the salaries up because you're in demand. Yeah. But I think that's hard for me to answer because I've always worked on the on-air aspect of the side of it. So,
well, I was gonna say about producers, that I teach at Columbia College, and I do tell the students that if you want to get in the media, become a producer. There are so many TV jobs.
Yes. Producers are in high demand.
What makes a good producer to you?
Someone who can go with the flow, calm under pressure. It's kind of like the pilot in the control room.
Yeah. You
want your pilot to be someone who's calm, and when all hell's breaking loose, can figure out how to lead and what direction to go. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. You don't want the pilot to be the kind of person like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? The basics are being able to stack a good show with good flow, good news judgment.
What's good news judgment to you? Because sometimes I think that some stories are not really, on the radio side, I'm like, this is not really a story, or I think something's a good story. And then somebody will say to me, hey, why are you doing that? That's not a good story idea.
I think it depends. Yes. Like sometimes I kind of cringe when we do too much. I'm going to get into trouble for that, but
well, then don't say it.
It drives me crazy. Like one of our anchors in the morning show can't stand it when we do stories about like fast food, like Taco Bell's got a new taco coming out. It drives him crazy. It's like that.
Yeah, but a lot of people do go to these places, but
right. But this is not news. But I think, sometimes on the other end, you might say, but this is for our target audience. What do the advertisers want? 25 to 18, or is it 25 to 54 now? That's the audience the sales want. What kind of stories are people of that age group interested in? Right. Are they interested in Taco Bell bringing back the Mexican pizza or something like that? So I think I would like in a perfect world, maybe they would be a producer who has their finger of maybe what the young generation, but also, part of the generation gap in a newsroom is, for example, when Dick Biondi passed away
Yeah.
several weeks ago,
Yeah.
all of our producers in their 20s had no idea who that was.
Right.
And it took,
But they also don't know media history of Chicago, you know what I'm
right.
saying?
And so one of our anchors had to explain to him, this obit needs to be in the show.
Yeah.
So I mean, in a perfect world, you would have new producers who are maybe young, because I'll tell you, the young producers, they are on it tech wise.
Yeah.
They understand technology. They can, I'll have to ask them, hey, help me with this, or something like that. But you also need the older, more experienced journalists who know about history and the history of Chicago politics and who was so and so.
Right. But my advice is read a book. There's so many books on it. Look at documentaries. There's so much to find out about Chicago. Even if you just move here from somewhere else, you can find out. And actually what's funny is that when you were at the Dirksen Federal building, I was thinking, oh my gosh, Don Drummond. How many times was he at the Dirksen Federal building?
Yeah. It's, you gotta know history. I mean, the one thing about
talk to people.
One thing what we do is you're a student forever, right?
Yeah.
You're always studying. You're always reading. I mean, people are saying, like, when I go home, they were like, well, what are you going to do today? Or what do you mean you have homework to do? I said, I have homework to do.
Right.
If I know I may be sent to, the trial for Madigan's ex-chief of staff, I got to read up on where we are in the trial.
Yeah.
For example, I got to read up what's the latest on the status of these lawsuits against Northwestern, and so I'm always reading, you're always studying, and with this job, the homework doesn't end after college.
Right. Well, also you have to have I think as with more education, I mean, you naturally become more curious. And so that's why certain people are very successful in their careers, because they never stop learning.
Right. Yeah. Always have that curiosity.
But I really think I think people should take a step farther. I've been saying this for a long time because I used to work at WBBM News Radio. And I really think people just have to get out there and talk to people, go to bars, go to the restaurant, talk to the policeman on the street. Like people are posting this stuff online. They're like, why? I'm like, just go outside and talk. I just said this on Twitter. Go outside and talk to the police and find out.
Right.
I
mean, read New Yorker, but sometimes you got to read People magazine too.
Right. Exactly. Or just talk to people, or just like if you're in a store, it's like, hey, just find out what people are feeling and what they're like, or go to a neighborhood and just get the feel for it instead of assuming an area is like all gangbanger or something.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, I made the mistake also as I think of myself as the average Joe. And I think everyone thinks like me, but then, people have to remind me, though, that's not the case, and I think that's one great thing about working on the street is no other job. I get to go places and see things and meet people that the average person will probably never get to meet. Even if you're standing like in Wrigley Field or on the 50-yard line at Soldier Field, think of the average person. Will they ever get that opportunity?
Right.
No. And I think no other job exposes you to people from so many walks of life. From the congressmen and senators to the filthy rich people to the person, who's trying to live from paycheck to paycheck. It's a great reality check. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
And I think, what other job exposes you to people from all kinds of backgrounds?
Yeah. Okay. I have a question also about just the writing part. I just thought of this when you're talking about people. Okay. So when you're going live on the air and then you're talking off the top of your head and then you look at your notes. Okay. How do you keep accurate notes? If you're asking somebody a question, how do you keep accurate notes and write down everything that's correct?
Are you talking about like my notes as to what I'm going to say in my live shot?
Yeah, but also when you're talking to somebody off camera and they tell you information, how do you write accurately? Are they speaking slowly, or how do you
I kind of have my own version of shorthand.
Okay.
Which I find my younger colleagues don't know what shorthand is.
Right.
But there's a couple tricks. I mean, there is a way for the photographer to roll back on the digital card. So if I need to listen to it again, another reporter taught me this trick. Have you ever heard of an app called Otto?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Sometimes when I'm interviewing somebody, I will turn on the app and it automatically transcribes the interview word for
Okay.
word.
Are you talking about Otter or Otto?
Otter, like
Otter, yeah. I know that one.
OTTER.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that helped tremendously when, in the height of COVID, and you remember when Governor Pritzker was holding those 60-minute news conferences every
Yes.
single day. And I would just turn on the app and put it right there, or put it next to the TV monitor. And that way I could go back. But usually when I'm doing an interview, I can remember, I'll be like, oh, there's my sound bite.
Okay.
That's the in, that's the out. And then I tell my editor, here's the in and out.
So what about I guess what I'm saying is that when it's not on video, because you'll say, you and some other reporters will say so and so, police say blah blah blah, and you haven't recorded it. Somebody just talked to you, or neighbors say such and such.
I don't know. I just remember.
Okay.
I can remember.
Okay. Okay, you just remember. I was just wondering how people do that on the fly.
Yeah, I could just remember.
Okay, so anything else? Or any advice for, because everybody wants to get to this market, especially TV.
Oh gosh.
Actually, well, my question is that if somebody's a producer, do they have any chance of doing anything on air, even digitally, not broadcast?
I would say it's not impossible, but not easy.
Okay, so they can't do digital stories where they're interviewing somebody or something.
It does happen. I mean, we have Chicago News Now, which is digital. And so, and some of those people were producers who are appearing on camera.
Okay.
So, I'm not saying impossible, but sometimes if you're at the right place at the right time, or you see an opportunity, jump on it.
Okay.
Because it can happen. I have to be honest, I don't think it happens a lot.
Okay.
But I think, I mean, it's, you ever hear stories about like actors don't want their children to be actors? Yeah. We kind of say the same thing in broadcast news. Like a lot of us tell our children or don't do what I do for a living. Because I know doctors who tell their own children, don't be a doctor. Right. If you want a life, it's fascinating. It's interesting. It's never a dull moment, but it's not easy. It's
not easy, but at the same time, it's not like, because I've worked in it's not like anything else ever, because there's nothing like the deadlines.
Right.
The intensity, you're working with very talented people. Usually it's because when you're working in a company, for instance, and you're a writer or something, your deadlines are longer and it's not intense.
Yeah. In fact, a former news director of ours, she left us because she thought she had her dream job at working at Catholic Extension at the Archdiocese. And so.
And are you allowed to talk about this?
Huh?
Are you allowed to talk about this?
Yeah. Okay. She would have to, she had to put together a package for, a video, and they would give her 3 weeks to do it. And she was like, 3 weeks? I could do that in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think we forget, I think people are amazed at how fast we can make TV magic. Mm-hmm. Like I can do an interview at 11 o'clock and I'm on the air with it at 11:30. I mean, it's that fast, but thanks to technology, but yeah, we forget that the rest of the world doesn't move that fast.
Yeah, that's why it's so exhilarating. It's like a crazy ride. It reminds me sort of Star Trek, on being on a ship and you're all working together, and there are a lot of intense things going on.
I think if you're the kind of person who thrives on that craziness and you love that adrenaline rush and making the deadline and all that, then, it's great. My college roommate recently got out of TV and she took a government PR job. And she said for the first couple of weeks, she didn't know what to do with herself. Yeah. She was used to the fast deadlines and getting no sleep and the phone constantly ringing. And then she was like, oh my gosh. She said, my stress level plummeted. And she goes, I'm at work at 7:30, 8 o'clock. I have a lunch hour. I'm home by 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the evening. I actually can have dinner with my husband and my kid. And she goes, I have weekends and holidays off. She's like, this is a whole new world.
Yeah.
And so she's like, this is how normal people live.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, but any advice for you know, people who, because you're basically living in the dream for a lot of people who want to be in TV.
Persistence. I think you have to be the kind of person who doesn't give up, has a lot of tenacity, and yeah, it is not easy. I'm not going to lie about that, but I think it takes a special personality. I think who, you know, someone would drive, someone who could keep their eye on the prize. And I would say, you know, get your resume out there, go to conferences, go to conventions. You know, a lot of it is word of mouth, you know, talk to as many people as possible. But a lot of it is, yeah, I mean, back when I started, I would just send resume after resume after resume, hoping, you know, somebody would take notice. And I think, you know, and you could, when they return your resume tape to you, we used to look at where they hit eject. You could tell if you lost them at a minute in or a minute two in, then you could figure out what you went wrong. But I would say it's a lot different these days, isn't it?
Oh yeah, one thing I just thought of when you were talking about earlier, you were talking about how you have to know what you're talking about, and you know, basically you have to have a strength. That's the same with radio. If you go on the air, you have to be strong. And what I've noticed is, I told my boss this, is that it seems like in the culture outside the media, it seems like women are supposed to speak a different way, like always ending sentences like this and vocal fry and so forth. And it seems like news, they teach you to do the opposite thing. Has that changed over the years? Like women are supposed to be authoritative on the air, it seems. But then when you go into outside the media, you can't talk like that or else people think you're rude or something.
That whole thing about if a man is assertive and aggressive, then he's a strong leader. If a woman is not, then she's, you know.
Yeah. Well, and also I just noticed that. Yeah. And also I noticed women like who are speaking publicly and who are in corporate meetings and so forth, they're not speaking in an aggressive kind of way.
Right.
They're pulling back, but in broadcasting, you have to be like that.
You have to have, I'm not saying you have to purposely lower your voice or anything like that, but you know, being born with a golden throat helps, you know, that in radio. And so, but that's where the vocal coaching and the talent coaching comes in. I mean, you know, you have to have a voice that at least is comfortable and soothing to the ear.
Yeah.
I think. And that comes with the authoritativeness. I mean, it's just, you know, it's the whole first impression thing. Yeah. But I think, you know, men, maybe they just have the benefit of the doubt because they have lower voices to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
Although there is a trend I noticed.
For women.
No, but also I do notice a trend though recently, and I pointed out to my colleagues, is on TV, the women don't necessarily have low voices
No.
much. Yeah. So it seems like things have changed. They have, because when we take it for radio, it's sort of shrill sounding.
Yeah. Oh, you mean when you try to translate? Okay, I see. Yeah. Well, you know, what I always thought, if you're going to do radio, a really good voice is more important because you don't have the visuals helping you, guide you, and distracting, because all you have is the person's voice. I think for that, having that golden throat is really important in radio.
Yeah.
If you're working in television in front of the camera and you're not born with the golden throat or just naturally gifted with a great smooth voice, it may not be as important because you have the visuals to help you out.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And also you were saying, you're talking about producers. Okay. I think this may be a last question, but you're saying about producers being needed. What about TV writers? Do those exist anymore?
Yes, we have writers.
Are those hard to find, or is producing the hardest?
We have some writers who don't want to be producers and just stay writers. We have writers who eventually become producers. So, I have not heard that it's hard to find writers. I hear my bosses complain it's the producers that are hard to find.
Okay. So anybody out there should try to become a TV producer. There are a lot of opportunities, basically.
Well, you know, with producing, you're going to get closer to regular hours than an on-air person might. I mean, it's not going to be like a normal 9 to 5 banker's gig, you know, or anything like that. But it may not be as, you know, you don't have to stand outside, you don't have to be in bad neighborhoods, you're not, you know, the stress level is a little different, but you might have like more regular, it's a little more controlled, if that, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else before that you didn't get a chance to say?
No, I think I've talked a lot longer than I thought you probably wanted me to.
Right. No, it's not about that. The last live stream I didn't stop streaming. The last live stream I did was 3 hours.